Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where last episode we had an extremely normal takeoff from Moho, and we are now ready to go back to Tylo. However, I want to hop into the R&D center real quick. We've got about 5,000 science at this point, so we could definitely think about, like, oversized monoprop fuel isn't really what we'd be super interested in. I'm wondering right now, do we have large-sized reaction wheels? That's the interesting question at this point. Clampetron Shielded, Inline, and Mark II Clampetron, those aren't super necessary for us. Heavy trusses, yeah, I don't think that any of these available sciences are that big of a deal. We could go for the XL Methylox tanks. What we're really interested in, though, is grabbing something like... Let's see, where would our larger SRBs be? That would be something that would definitely help the monstrosity, no doubt about that. So larger SRBs would be very, very good. If there are any. Are we maxed out on SRB size? Hang on. XL hydrogen tanks, XL electronics. So that's an XL-sized remote guidance unit and battery module. That's an RTG. That's a pretty decent RTG. Okay, second gen there. We've got larger landing struts, which would probably be good, but we can't get right now. The thing that I'm looking for here is to see if there are any larger SRBs, and that does not appear to be the case. In which case, we might want to rework that first stage to use XL size. So this is just using Methylox fuel tanks here. And it's got an adapter. So that does not include any engines in the XL size. Well, that's certainly interesting. Are there no XL-sized engines? That would be mildly surprising to me. I mean, we could just use an engine plate and have multiple large-size engines. That is definitely an option. I'm just checking through here. Yeah, I definitely don't see any of that. Okay, well, let's just, in that case, let's just grab our XL Methylox tanks. We'll research this, and let's head back to the VAB, and let's do a little bit of rework on our first stage, which is problematic, and our landing stage, which is also problematic. So let's not save this workspace. Hang on. Let's open this workspace. This should be the Moho Lander 2, I believe. Yes, this looks right. So, here's what I'm going to do. First things first. We're going to make this worse. So we're going to just detach here. And then I'm going to detach this guy. I'm going to put on an additional tank here, like this. And then we're going to, well, we're going to detach that for sure. We don't want to have the light. We don't want to have the landing leg. Then we're going to attach here. Now, this is going to be a bit problematic for our landing legs overall. But something like this will give us a lot more thrust to weight over a location like Tylo. No doubt about that. So this stage over Kerbal is 9676 meters per second. What we're interested in, though, is over Tylo. So the thrust to weight here is 1.83. That is viable. So I definitely do want to put in some controls up here. What is that under? Command control vessels? No, I don't think it is. What category is it under? It's not under engines, for sure. It's not under fuel tanks. It shouldn't be under coupling. Shouldn't be under payload. Ground, is it just under utility? Yes, it is. Okay, fascinating. So I definitely want to put in some reaction wheels up here like this. I also want to put probably some RTGs on this thing, but it's possibly fine as it is. Possibly fine. I do think RTGs would make some amount of sense. So we could put some small RTGs on here that would end up being just like these guys, right? And we just put a couple of them on top. They're quite small. I have no idea if they'll survive ascent. That'll be interesting. The landing here, of course, needs some work. If we extend out these landing legs, we can see, yeah, that's definitely going to be very useful. So let's detach these landing legs and let's put on some structures here. Specifically, we're going to want some trusses. And I'm currently thinking something along the lines of, well, we can just have this guy out over here. That's in the extra small category, but that's probably absolutely fine. And then we can have these attached on about like this. It's good enough. And then we can have them drop down like so. And then we can have our landing struts on here. This is not doing the quad coupling the way I expected it to. Okay. I'm going to detach it here and reattach it here. Is it quad coupled correctly now? Now it is. Okay. So I'm going to put some landing legs here. We might want to consider having multiple landing legs on each of these. So putting it like this. And then also over on this side. About like so. So our landing legs would look something like that. Now, we should probably strut this, because otherwise we're going to have some issues, I suspect. So let's put a strut connector going from here to here, like that. Then we're, of course, going to retract these legs. We don't want to necessarily lift with them extended. I'm wondering about them burning off from the engine plume. We'll see if that ends up being a thing. If it is, we can probably just land on the engines, but I am noticing that this center engine is a bit lower than the others. So we probably want to grab Rotate and Translate tool here and just move this guy down a smidgen to somewhere around here or so. I want the center to be slightly higher than the others. So it'll end up being something kind of like that. Okay. So now, of course, oh, we didn't even have the fifth engine in here. Over Tylo, this is currently 2.25. Beautiful. So that will be absolutely fine. We're going to want to reattach this stage, but I kind of want to just rebuild the monstrosity here. So let's just completely get rid of this, and let's rebuild it from scratch, designed to do everything that the previous one did, but be less horrific. That would be a good thing. So let's just put in a large stack decoupler here. And then I want to put in an adapter here. And this is an XL size adapter, which we actually should have access to. Yes, like this guy. Then we're going to do some XL fuel tanks here. And that's going to be something like, how many are we actually going to want to have here? Maybe 3? I have no idea how this is going to go. Our thrust to weight is probably going to be spicy like this. So let's just bring this up a little bit. Oh, that's not our root part. Okay, this is our root part. Sure, that's fine. So we're just going to bring this guy on down. And the question then is, what are we going to do for engines? Well, we want probably these bad boys, but as you can see, that's not the right size. So we might want to go... I'm actually wondering about the specific impulse at atmosphere. So that's 270. If we compare that to a mainsail, it is slightly more efficient in atmosphere. Okay, so if we went for an engine plate... We don't have engine plates? Hang on. This should be under structures, probably? Engine mounts. Okay, they just renamed them. So we've got a 2.5 meter and a 1.25 meter. That's not ideal. Okay. So in that case, we might want to go for... I'm thinking about downsizing this to mainsails, but then having 4 mainsails that we lift this with. It sticks out a little bit, but 4 mainsails should produce significantly more thrust than 1 Mammoth 2. Is that correct? Let's see. 13... What's 1.3 times 4? That would be like 5.2? Yeah, this will be more thrust than this. So that's fine. It's slightly less fuel efficient. If this was KSP1, I would change the shroud on these, and we'd be able to make it look a little bit better. As it is, we might just have to clip these together and have it go something kind of like this or so. They'll stick out a little bit. But this is kind of almost SLS in a way here. I'm wondering right now, let's get rid of these stages. I'm wondering right now what this thrust to weight is. It's probably terrible. 0.58? Yeah, that's about what I would have expected. So what if we duplicated this? Are these enough to lift even this? That's an interesting question to ask right now. I'm not sure. We can find out. So let's duplicate this and let's strut it on. I want to, like, bicouple it. So we would put it, like, here, right? But for now, I just want to duplicate this and put it out here. Then we're going to put on our bicouplings. Then this would go here. I don't care about the positioning or the clipping. I'm just interested right now in what the thrust to weight on this would end up being. So 0.23, 0.61... that would be 0.45, and when we combine all of these together, 0.68. So it is very slightly positive. Very slightly positive. Let's ditch this for now. And the question then becomes, is it even worth it to do that? The answer is obviously no, it is not. So we've got a situation like this, right? And we could definitely put on some SRBs. Those would probably be a decent way to do it. And I'm wondering what the thrust to weight of 8 of these would be. I'm not going to, like, attach them with decouplers for the time being. I just want to know, that would put us at 1.47. That's not so bad. Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. So this is way less of a monstrosity, but I do want to consider putting in decouplers. That will be a useful thing to have for sure. We would put in decouplers about there, and then we would put these guys in here, in theory. So something along the lines of that. We would want to move these down a little bit, so we're resting, like, on the SRBs or very close to it. We're not quite as down as I'd like to be, so we're actually going to need to grab the decoupler and move that ever so slightly down, like that. Okay, so now we could just put some nose cones on here. I'm wondering what we have for size there. Large would be too big, so just... oh. No, these nose cones are correct. So it would be something like this. This thrust to weight is considerably lower than what we... or this overall amount of thrust should be considerably lower than what we had before. I think that's very, very obvious, but it's probably still enough to get us there and back. I think, as long as we get back up into orbit, we can always refuel this, right? So that's fine. I'm not too concerned about that. We should definitely put some struts on here. So I'd like to strut these down here. I'd like to strut them up top. And I'd like to strut them inwards, like so. This is a way simpler booster design. I'm not convinced that it's a good booster design, but it is significantly simpler. And it'll be about 1.5 thrust to weight. It's a little on the low side. I would like to find a way to boost up that thrust a little bit. We could replace the mainsails with more powerful engines. That will result in more clipping, more visual issues. So there is that. We could go with Mammoth 2s. And that would definitely be the way to go here, I think. Or actually, rhinos would be slightly more thrust, but also slightly more efficient. So if we were to ditch these guys here and we were to take this down to 4x symmetry. Oh, that took us up to the top. What are we looking at right now? Okay, let's go to the bottom. Cool. And I want this to be on 4x symmetry, and I want to put it in over here. Snap points are making this very, very difficult. Can we turn off snapping? Okay, let's turn off snapping and see if that helps. Oh, that was a spot there. There. Now, the core issue here, of course, is that when we detach these SRBs, they are going to destroy our engines. We don't want that. So we're going to need to move these in. So let's just do... That is not what I wanted to do. Okay, let's reattach these. If I can find that spot again. Okay, I'm going to undo it then. In theory, that... Oh, we're back up to the top. In theory, that should be reasonably fine. So we're back over here, and yeah, cool. So I want to be in the rotate and translate tool, and I want to grab this guy. We want to just move it in like so, and move this in like so. I mean, this is almost certainly going to cause problems, right? When they're clipped together like this, I'm almost certain that this is going to burn off and explode. Almost certain of that. I want to merge these together. This is a good, it's about the same thrust to weight, actually. It's only ever so slightly higher thrust to weight, but that's okay. We did definitely expect that. So I want to try this. I do expect these engines to burn off and explode here. So let's just save this for right now. And let's put it out on the pad and see what happens. I do expect those rhinos to explode. And I expect them to explode after we fire the engines. So we're going to be firing the engines now. Interesting. How have they not exploded? Our thrust to weight was definitely extremely slow off the pad. Our frame rate lifting this is significantly better, which is not surprising in the slightest. So that's looking good. I'm definitely still concerned about those engines being clipped together like that. But that is a theoretical possibility, then, that we would be able to clip together 4 Mammoth 2s in a similar fashion and get a significantly higher thrust-to-weight ratio out of that. I am surprised that this hasn't blown up. That is utterly shocking to me. But okay. I mean, our thrust to weight is certainly low. We've got about 5 kilometer apoapsis here. I just want to take this up to approximate orbit and just see what our overall DV, once we get there, is going to be looking like in this center stage. That'll be an interesting question that I'd like to answer as long as we're here and not actively exploding. So that seems decent. So yeah, let's just keep lifting this thing up. It's definitely slow. No doubt about it. But we're at about 12 kilometer apoapsis. I want to keep lifting this. This is almost certainly not going to be the final design that we're going to go with here. I'm not super happy with it necessarily, but it's definitely less horrific than the monstrosity. Let's put this into prograde, and let's switch over to orbital velocity now and see what happens. We've got those reaction wheels up top that will help us control. We're tumbling. Okay. So that's good to know. Our attitude control at this stage is problematic at best. That said, we got it under control. This is going to be a problem, of course. We lost a lot of velocity to that. But that's certainly interesting. So, yeah, we lost a lot of our vertical speed to that. But fascinating. Okay, SRB detach is imminent. Not the best SRB detach in the world, but it's okay. Was relatively clean. And I'm just noting our current remaining DV here. It's certainly interesting. We would be a lot higher than this. Of course, our current altitude is not high enough due to the tumble, but that was an interesting test, for sure. We're going to revert that back, and we have a couple of things that I would like to work on, but that's very, very close, I think, to being functional. The real question is one of fuel, right? So we'll have to get out to Tylo, land, and at least get into Tylo orbit on what we've got here. I'm pretty sure we can do that. I'm like 99% sure we can do that. So, what do we want to do regarding our other problems? Well, we can certainly change our thrust to weight by upgrading these rhinos to Mammoth 2s. I am completely shocked that that didn't explode. I want to try the Mammoth 2s. So we would put them somewhere out here. Ooh, what was that? Yep, right there. And then we clip them together. This is very good rocket design right here. This is absolutely excellent rocket design. There are no problems whatsoever with what we're doing here. Perfect. So that is wonderful. And with that in place, we're going to be sitting on those rockets. That's fine. I want to do this, and I want to see what our thrust to weight will be. 1.91, that is a lot higher thrust to weight. Okay, let's do a quick test launch. And that should also give us more attitude control, because the gimbal on these is... let's see, 3-degree gimbal compared to 4-degree gimbal. So it's a little less gimbal, but it's a lot more thrust. So that should be relatively fine. This stage is going to be... it's slightly less specific impulse. Let's see what it feels like. We might want to go back to the rhinos. The rhinos are, I think, a perfectly viable ascent strategy, and they're slightly more efficient, but I want to see what this thrust to weight feels like. Okay, so let's get this out of here for a test flight. Okay, they immediately burn off. Sure, that's fine. That's what I expected to happen last time, to be clear. We're actually lifting off with just the SRBs, but barely. Okay, let's revert this back. So that means that we're going to have to go with the Rhino setup, or what if we went with a single engine down here? It would be a little bit on the small side, but we could come down this way. Can I scroll down, please? Thank you. We could come down this way, replace this with a single engine, but I would like to do an adapter here. So we would do an XL size adapter, flipping it around this direction, and we'd position it there, and then this guy would go here. Now, obviously, this is sticking really far down, so I would like to grab the move tool, and we would just move these guys down a ways, about like so. That gives us a little more fuel and a lot less thrust. What's our thrust to weight at? 1.36. That is honestly a little too low. Okay, this is our most powerful engine, right? I'm pretty sure the Mammoth 2 is the most powerful engine that we have right now. So we're looking for the atmospheric thrust, 3701. Let's just check through all of these. I'm fairly certain this is the most powerful. Definitely is. Okay, so is that fine? That's certainly an interesting question. Let's just test it. The thrust to weight is on the low side. 100%. It's absolutely on the low side. But it was with the rhinos, too. This should be broadly similar to the 4 rhinos, and it's less, you know, less janky. Okay. Barely any motion off the pad. It's definitely chunky. No doubt about that. We could layer out additional boosters, and that may not be a bad idea, to be honest. We could go liquid boosters instead of the solid boosters, and that would probably be for the best. I think this thrust to weight is just too low. We could probably limp into orbit, but it would be potentially rough. We're losing a lot to gravity, so I would like to redesign our side boosters a little bit here. We're going to go with liquid-fueled boosters. Okay, so we're going to hop on down this way. We're going to ditch these, get out of here, and we're going to head down this way. I want to probably use mainsails here. So let's use the 2.5 meter fairing size here. So that'll be these guys. Actually, no. These guys. Yeah. Just enough space to pull that off. Cool. So let's do something kind of like this. And then we would use, for our engines, almost certainly we would go with something like mainsails. Although they're a little small. We could use additional Mammoth 2s here, actually. It would be something like that. And then we would do an adapter. And we would adapt this down. That is way too big. We'd adapt this down like so, and then nose cones on top of that. Like this. Then we would definitely want to strut this together. So we would do something like that. And then up top, we would strut these here. And then internal struts. So that would be from about here to about here. Then we definitely want to run a fuel line as well. So the fuel line would run something like this. Okay, what would that thrust to weight look like? If we combine these stages together, 1.16. That is significantly worse. However, 3 minute and 42 second burn time. This would be a 0 second burn time? I don't think that's accurate. No, that shouldn't be the case. However, we can certainly add another layer here, and we're getting back into monstrosity territory. This is because of our SRB size, I feel like, but whatever. So this will be a little further out, and then we could just put Clydesdales out here, right? The Clydesdales would go about there, in theory. I'd like to lower them down a bit, so that would be something like this. There we go. Nose cones on top of those. And then we just need to strut them. So I would strut them here. Make sure this is nice and rigid. Strut them here. And then here. Like that. So this is kind of less of a monstrosity. It's still a bit of a monstrosity. And the real question that I have here is, well, we certainly want to do this first. Then we would detach these stages like so. Yeah, this would detach up here, and then all of these engines would fire simultaneously, like so. Those would detach, that would detach. Yeah, this is all right up here. Okay, so it would be something along the lines of this. Let's put this out on the pad and see what happens. It's about 1.5 thrust to weight, so it's a little bit higher thrust to weight. It's not amazing. And it's just kind of falling apart. Okay, we may or may not be rigid here. Let's see what happens. Well, that's certainly spicy. Okay. Well, We don't have a huge amount of thrust to weight. We knew that that would be the case. So let's go to 4x warp and just see what this ascent looks like. I don't know that it's great. In fact, I'm pretty sure this isn't great. The frame rate is significantly lower than it was before. No doubt about it. So it's interesting how so much of the frame rate is impacted by just having, like, a couple of additional tanks here. That's very interesting. No doubt about that. We've also got a pretty good oscillation going on here, but we're moving reasonably quickly. We can test our gimbaling here fairly soon. We should have reasonably strong gimbal. But we do just want to punch up through the atmosphere. We've got all this exposed stuff up here, which isn't, you know, ideal. There's a certain oscillation occurring, but this is not our final launch here. This is just a test launch, and we'll see what ends up happening with it. So an apoapsis of about 8 kilometers, 9 kilometers right now. Our SRBs are going to detach reasonably soon, and the question is, how clean are these detachments going to be? I expect them to actually be reasonably clean. Okay, attitude holding is not the best at this moment. It's possible that we're over-gimbaled. Let's take this down to 1x and find out. I'm going to put us into prograde, and I'm going to switch us over, and let's see if we have a tumble here. Okay, moment of truth. We're definitely overshooting. Okay, so that is noted. This is a big tumble. Where does it end up recovering? Does it end up recovering? It did recover without doing a full tumble, but that's not pretty. So that, of course, indicates that we're going to have to go pretty much straight up on future launches. Our SRBs are burnt out at this point, and we're just trying to make our way back over to the prograde marker. It's not going so well. We want to detach the SRBs, but with us in this big of a tumble, or rather with there being this much turn, it's not going to be a clean detachment. We are recovered from the tumble, but we did lose a lot from that. Yeah, you can see we're at like a 135-degree inclination right now. Yeah, that's definitely not ideal. So that is some lessons learned there. Let's detach the SRBs. Clean detachment of the SRBs. So that is certainly something. I'm watching our apoapsis here to determine thrust to weight. It's going up. So we're actually in a position where this would make it to orbit. Now, we don't want it to. We've learned some lessons about the ascent profile, and we want to bring some extra Kerbals along. So we're going to revert this back, but I actually feel like that is going to work for us to launch this. So that's absolutely interesting. We are probably going to launch that for real next episode, and we're going to head off to Tylo. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Andy McGar, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Tommy, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.